One man stood over the body of the fallen Dark Lord, a band of gold cooling in his hand, and chose not to destroy it. That single choice would doom him in a marsh by a great river, and leave the world to wait 3,000 years for it to be undone. This is the road of Isildur, from the breaking of Barad-dûr to the reeds of the Gladden fields. When 5 centuries of the Second Age had passed, Sauron stirred anew in the east, naming himself Lord and gathering to him the men long darkened by Melkor's old malice. By the 1000th year, the rising might of Númenor's seafarers alarmed him, and he sought a hidden fastness whence he might watch the west and work his will unseen. He chose Mordor, the Black Land, and from a high dark place looked out upon a realm walled by mountains and lit by a single mountain of fire. Ringed about by the Ashen Mountains and the Mountains of Shadow, that land held at its heart Orodruin, and near it Sauron set the seat of his strength. Upon the iron plateau of Gorgoroth, he began the raising of Barad-dûr, the Dark Tower, greatest of the strongholds of Middle-earth, climbing slow and black through long years of secret toil. Some 600 years he labored, and returning alone to the fires of Mount Doom, he forged in secret the One Ring, the master ring to rule all others, and poured into it much of his own power and malice. With its making he completed the Dark Tower, and bound the very foundations of Barad-dûr to the ring's enduring strength, so that while the ring endured, the tower could not wholly fall. When Sauron stormed Minas Ithil in the year 3429 of the Second Age, and gave its white tree to the flame, the faithful knew that delay was death. So in 3430, Elendil the Tall, High King of Arnor and Gondor, and Gil-galad, last High King of the Noldor in Middle-earth, swore together the last alliance of elves and men, the greatest host that the West had mustered since the wars of Beleriand. In 3431, their armies came to Imladris, and there they tarried 3 years while strength gathered. There too Isildur left his wife, and his young son Valandil, born in that very valley in the keeping of Elrond, before the host marched on. In 3434, the joined power of elves and men crossed the misty mountains and came down at last upon the Dagorlad, the battle plain before the Black Gate. In a slaughter long remembered, Sauron's legions were broken and driven back into Mordor. Through Cirith Gorgur the alliance passed, and laid siege to Barad-dûr, the Dark Tower razed with the malice of the ring. 7 bitter years that siege endured, while many fell on either side, and the hour of reckoning drew near. In the 7th year of the siege, in Second Age 3441, the long war upon Mordor's dark plain came at last to its bitter ending. Gil-galad and Elendil, mightiest of the last alliance, climbed the very slopes of Orodruin to grapple with the Dark Lord himself. There in that dreadful wrestling, both kings were thrown down, Gil-galad consumed by Sauron's heat, and Elendil felled, his sword Narsil shattered beneath him as he fell. Then Isildur, son of Elendil, stooped in grief beside his father and took up the broken hilt-shard of Narsil. With that jagged remnant of the blade he struck, and cut the One Ring from the Dark Lord's hand. So Sauron's spirit fled, wraith-like and powerless, and the master of the Barad-dûr was undone. But Isildur did not cast the ring into the fire that lay so near. He took it for his own, a weregild for father and brother, most precious heirloom of his house, and in that choice the long sorrow of men was sown. When Sauron was thrown down upon the slopes of Orodruin and the Dark Tower fell to ruin, The one ring was cut from his hand and came at last to Isildur, son of Elendil. In that hour, the victory of the last alliance seemed complete. Yet Elrond half-elven and certain, the shipwright led Isildur to the Samath Nor and bade him cast the ring into the fire from whence it came, that its evil might be undone forever. But Isildur would not. The ring was beautiful to his eyes, and he named it Wergild for his father Elendil and his brother Anarion, both slain in the long war. So he kept it, precious beyond reason, and the counsel of the wise was refused. In Mina's Anor he set down upon a scroll all that he had learned of it, how the gold burned hot at the first taking, and how the fiery letters faded as the ring grew cool. This knowledge he hid even from his own sons, save Elendil his heir alone, whom of all his children he trusted and loved the most. After the last alliance threw down the dark tower, Isildur came again into the south, and upon his brow he set the Elendilmere, the white star of Elendil. He proclaimed himself king in Arnor, and claimed sovereign lordship over the Dunedain of both realms, north and south alike. In memory of Anarion, his brother, slain before Barad-dûr, he planted in Mina's Anor a seedling of the white tree, rescued long ago from burning Mina's Ithil, and it endured there for centuries. For a year he tarried, setting the realm of Gondor in order and raising upon Aman Anwar a secret tomb for Elendil his father. He took his nephew Menildil, youngest son of Anarion and the last man born in Númenor, and instructed him in the governance of the south, giving Gondor into his keeping. Thus the kingship of the southern realm passed to Anarion's line, while Isildur held the high kingship over all. And in the second year of the Third Age, his work accomplished, Isildur made ready to journey north to Arnor and the house of Elendil, bearing with him the ring he named his bane and his precious heirloom. Near the Gladden fields, where Anduin runs wide and the reeds grow tall, the doom of Isildur found him. His company, scarce 200 strong and weary from the long march north, was ambushed in the failing light by a great host of orcs out of the misty mountains. The enemy charged and charged again, and the men of Gondor were hemmed against the river. Seeing the end drawing near, Isildur sent his esquire Odur with one companion to flee into the dark, bearing the shards of Narsil, that the sword of Elendil might not perish with him. Then his sons fell about him one by one, until only Elendil, his heir and best beloved, remained, and Elendil bade his father go and use the ring. Isildur set it upon his finger and passed out of sight. The orcs could yet sense his scent, and he ran to Anduin and cast himself in to swim across. But there, midway in the cold current, the ring betrayed him. It slipped from his finger, and Isildur was revealed, and Orcaros took him. So fell Isildur, last of the living sons of Elendil, and the ring passed into the river's keeping. So the Elendilmere, the white star of Elendil's house that Isildur bore upon his brow, was lost in the cold waters of Anduin, and was never looked upon again. Only in a later age did the smiths of Imladris wrought a second in its stead. Yet the line of kings did not fail, for in fair Imladris dwelt Valandil, youngest son of Isildur, who had been left in the keeping of Elrond before the host marched to war. To him passed the kingship of Arnor, and through him the heirs of Isildur endured unbroken down the long years of the Third Age. But the Ring of Power, the ruling ring that Isildur had named his most precious heirloom and bought with great pain, slipped from his hand as the dark waters took him. It sank into the great river and lay still upon the bed of Anduin, and there it abided. Out of all knowledge it passed, out of memory and song, biding in the silence of the deep. Sauron's masterwork waited in the dark, patient and undying, for an age yet to come when it would rise again and seek a new bearer. Isildur's name means servant of the moon, yet it is his one act of keeping that the world remembers, an heirloom that became a curse. The ring would lie in the riverbed for nearly 2,500 years before it found another finger. If you'd follow more roads like this one through Middle-earth's deep history, consider subscribing.